Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the Lunch and Learn Advanced Care Planning. My name is Natalie and I'm from the PHN Education team, and I'm joined today by Charles Broadfoot, Senior Project Officer from Palliative Care, and Deb Sullivan, Clinical Nurse Consultant with Dementia Australia. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land which we live and work on. For myself, on the Central Coast, that's Darkinjung country, and I'd also like to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. A few things to let you know about this session. It will be recorded and it's available for you to view in our education library, along with a copy of the presentation slides in a few days' time. As attendees, your camera and microphone are automatically disabled. If you do have questions during the presentation, please send them through the meeting chat, which you'll find located in your control panel. These will be answered at the end of the presentation. Please keep your mics and cameras disabled through the session. An evaluation link will be available in the chat at the end of the session. Your feedback is really important as it enables us to provide future education sessions. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce Charles.
Thanks so much, Natalie, and thanks everyone for giving up your lunch breaks to spend it with us today. Just before I hand over to Deb, I just wanted to let you all know that the PHN has just released an expression of interest for general practices this morning. So the PHN is partnering with Deb, with Dementia Australia's Nightingale program, and we're offering 12 practices in the Hunter region the opportunity for Deb to come in and support the practice nurse in running 2 clinics over a 3-month period. And Deb will be there with the ultimate goal to support your patients with dementia in completing an advanced care plan or advanced care directive. So it's also an opportunity for your practice nurse to learn a bit more around building confidence with having those end-of-life conversations in terms of end-of-life planning. Those practices who will be successful will also receive a $750 grant, and that's to compensate for their nurses' time and commitment. I will email out to all of the webinar registrants information about the EOI after the webinar, but it was also published today in our PHN weekly newsletter. So that's all from me. Thanks again, Deb, for your time, and I'll hand over to you.
Lovely. Thanks, Charles. Thanks, Natalie. I'll just share my presentation, so bear with me while we get all the logistics there. Okay, so can I get a thumbs up or a yes to say that you can now see the first slide, which is the welcome slide? Fantastic. All right. So very conscious that this is very likely in your lunch break. So we're going to make this quick and concise and the most valuable for you, knowing that this doesn't have to be the last time that you can reach out to me or the Nightingale team for any support around advanced care planning. And at the end of the presentation, a little bit more about some of the other core business that our program does. So yes, today we're going to talk about advanced care planning and dementia, specifically within the general practice setting. So this webinar is designed for clinicians and managers within general practice, but the material can be applied to all health professionals. A little bit about me. I've been a registered nurse since 2003, and I've spent most of my career in the specialties of diabetes education, health research economics, residential aged care, and more recently working with Dementia Australia. So what we're going to discuss today is advanced care planning, particularly advanced care planning within the context of living with dementia and supporting your clients living with dementia. A few tips from me that I've learned along the way, and also an opportunity for you to share your challenges and barriers. So hopefully I'll be able to get you with a little bit more momentum and a little bit more confidence in this incredibly important area. What this webinar won't cover, and while these are important, we simply just don't have the time to cover them today. The more specific legal documents, such as power of attorneys and wills, However, we will discuss Enduring Guardian, as that is quite relevant to advanced care planning. Voluntarily assisted dying, any diagnosis of dementia, nor the management and support for dementia-related behaviours. So let's take a deep breath and let's start from the beginning. What is advanced care planning? Let's take a look at the definition as per Advanced Care Planning Australia. And this is the wording that we would use for direct to consumers. It's the process that allows you to share with others what healthcare treatments you would like to have or refuse should you become seriously ill or injured and unable to make or communicate decisions about your treatment and care yourself. Now that is quite a mouthful, and trying to get all of those elements across to clients can be incredibly overwhelming. So this is the working definition that I use when communicating. The main aim is to enable you to make decisions now about the healthcare you would or would not like to receive in the future. And it can also include what you would like to occur as those final days of life approach. Now, if we just go back and have a look at the advanced care planning definition, it is the inability to make or communicate decisions. And that's the key element here for people living with dementia. So it all starts with conversations, and usually many over a period of time. Within general practice, that will usually start with you as the GP or practice nurse initiating and facilitating conversations so that you can actually allow them to have a space to express their values and preferences regarding their health. So some of the examples that we would use to start the conversation would be, tell me about the things that are most important to you. These might be their faith, their connection to country, their connection with family, the smell of freshly brewed coffee first thing in the morning, or perhaps their career. It's all about trying to understand what they value as their quality of life and what would it mean if those elements of quality of life were no longer possible due to their health. The second part is then to write those conversations down so that you as the treating team and also the family have access to those wishes when you need them. And those can be unexpected illnesses, it can be planned surgery, or it can indeed be transitioning to a new home, such as residential aged care. So have a think about what you currently use at the moment as the guiding document for these conversations. Which one do you use? It can be either an advanced care directive or an advanced care plan. The key difference between which document do I use is centred around the person living with dementia's ability to have capacity to make these decisions. And we're going to cover that shortly. So let's take a look at the key differences between an advanced care directive and an advanced care plan. An advanced care directive is created and signed by the person it is about, in this case, the person living with dementia. It outlines the values, life goals, preferred outcomes, and directions about care, and may include appointing a substitute decision maker. This does not have to be a more formalised Enduring Guardian document, but it can be the same person. Most importantly, once an advanced care directive has been created and signed by the person to which it's about, it is a legally binding document. And it does not have to be signed by anyone else. However, it is strongly recommended that the primary medical professional, such as the GP, and a family member sign it. And this is to indicate that they have cited the document and the information within it. Here in New South Wales, they have created an Advanced Care Plan Directive, and you can find this on the New South Wales Health website and also Advanced Care Planning Australia's website. An advanced care plan. Now, this is created by someone else as the person living with dementia has been assessed as no longer having decision-making capacity within the context of making decisions about their future health. In this case, it is usually the substitute decision maker, person responsible, or enduring guardian. Now, it outlines the same values, life goals, treatment decisions, including life prolonging, but it is what would be the best representation of what the person would have said if they were able to. So this is very much helping to guide and facilitate the person responsible or substitute decision maker standing in the shoes of the person and talking about the choices that they would have made if they were able to. Now, this document, while it is not legally binding, is an incredibly important guide for both decision makers and medical teams when decisions about health need to be made and the person living with dementia does not have the sufficient decision-making capacity to do it on their own. Not only in New South Wales, but nationally, this is the form that you would use. And it is a mouthful. It is called the Advanced Care Plan for a Person with Insufficient Decision-Making Capacity. And again, this is available on the New South Wales Health website and also Advanced Care Planning Australia. And that's both plans side by side, with the key differences centering around decision-making capacity. So now that we've covered the fundamental differences between those two documents, the big question is, how do you decide if a person has the capacity to make decisions on their own within the context of future planning? Now, as health professionals operating within New South Wales, your guiding light is the New South Wales Capacity Toolkit with its link below. Now, this toolkit is not specific for capacity with dementia, but rather serves as the underlying framework, regardless of any condition. Now, you are not legally or professionally bound to use this toolkit. However, it was developed as a guide in response to requests from lawyers, medical professionals, health workers, carers, and advocates who were requiring more information around capacity in general, the guiding principles, and particularly around capacity. So let's look about decision-making capacity in general terms, and then we'll extend that to living with dementia. So in general terms, when a person has capacity to make a decision, they are able to do all of the following: understand the facts involved, understand the main choices, weigh up the consequences of those choices, understand how consequences affect them, and finally, they must be able to communicate their decision to you and their rationale for why they are choosing their decision. So I want you to take a moment to reflect upon a client of yours that's currently active at your practice. Imagine that you would like to talk with them about some what-if scenarios relating to future health, such as life-prolonging interventions. An example might be, Mrs. Smith, what if your family had to make a decision about saving your life, but it meant that you could no longer eat food through your mouth, but through a tube in your stomach? Now, thinking about a current client of yours living with dementia who has communication difficulties and difficulties with abstract thought or planning, this is where the question comes in as to whether they have sufficient decision-making capacity within this area. Now, for some people, for some of your patients, it will be incredibly clear that they still have decision-making capacity as they are still able to run a household, run their own finances, they're still managing their career successfully. For others, it will be incredibly clear that they don't have sufficient decision-making capacity as their dependence upon others for the basic ADLs of life, they're now completely dependent. And so their ability to make these more complex decisions is clear that they don't. And sometimes it is unclear. So this is where this framework comes into play for you. Sometimes a person's decision-making capacity can be temporarily insufficient due to current health and many other stresses. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like us just to watch this 3-minute video, as while many of the clinicians online today have a very strong working knowledge of the pathophysiology and the impacts of living with dementia, if there are any practice nurses or practice managers who don't yet have that full understanding of how living with dementia does go on to not just impact memory and mood, but also the ability to plan, make decisions. This is probably one of the most powerful 3-minute videos that I've ever seen. And let's watch it together. Okay, so really important for me to note that that particular sequencing of dementia was specifically related to Alzheimer's disease, and not every type of dementia will follow the same sequencing, but gives a really good overview of how what we can initially think of dementia as issues with memory and mood does indeed, over time, eventually take over every part of the brain, including the ability to plan and make decisions about such complex health decisions either now or in the future. So some reflective practice opportunities for you. After watching that video, have a think about how do you, within your current practice, determine the stage or progression of a patient living with dementia beyond the initial diagnostics? Have a think about how often you discuss the progression of the condition with the person and their family, and how that will impact their decision-making capacity over time. Also, what methods do you use to easily communicate staging of dementia with, say, a colleague? So as a brief overview for that, in terms of common consumer-based language, we typically think about staging of dementia in 3 stages: early, middle, and late. And Dementia Australia uses these 3 for consumer-based, as does Alzheimer's UK and many publications that are consumer-focused. If we look to the medical, we will often find around 7 stages, starting from normal, no cognitive impairment noted, all the way through to very severe. Again, have a think about what staging diagnostic tool or assessment tool you use to be able to determine those stages. And if you currently don't have one, which one would be most appropriate for you to use? While this is very small, so difficult to see for you, what we use here in the Nightingale program is the FAST scale. Not to be confused with the acronym for stroke, it stands for Functional Assessment Staging of Alzheimer's. And this allows us to look beyond the cognitive challenges, but more based on functionality, and allows us to determine where they are in terms of function, supports, which we can then overlay to think about capacity. Another tool we use in our program is the Rockford Clinical Frailty Scale. Generally, for those that are mildly frail, will sit with mild dementia. Moderately frail is generally moderate dementia. And then finally, severely frail or very severely frail is when the person is living with severe dementia and typically is in the last 12 months of life. So some of the tips I'd like to share with you that I've learnt over this last year working with many families living with dementia in terms of helping them understand advanced care planning. My first tip would be to understand the finer details, the finer details around advanced care planning. The first one I've understood is ask if an enduring guardian has already been enacted. Generally, this will mean that the enduring has already been enacted because there is a significant level of decision-making capacity already gone, which will generally mean that the most appropriate document for you to use is the Advanced Care Plan. If an Advanced Care Directive is already in place, but when you look at the document, it doesn't quite have enough information there, enough meaningful information about quality of life and decisions around future planning, you have 2 options. If you determine that the person living with dementia still has decision-making capacity, you can encourage them to review and update their Advanced Care Directive and re-sign and redate. Or by this stage, if the person has lost their decision-making capacity, you can actually complement the Advanced Care Directive with an Advanced Care Plan. However, one caveat there is if an Advanced Care Plan is already in place, if an Advanced Care Directive is already in place and you're wanting to complement with a plan, that plan must not contradict what is already contained within the directive. My second tip is to have your preferred scripts ready. A lot of families will say, but why do I have to talk about this now? Why is this all of a sudden important now that I have dementia? Surely I'll be able to tell you what I want, or surely my family will know what to do. So some of the prepared scripts I have is in explaining how dementia will impact, as I said, not only memory, mood and emotions, but their ability to plan and make decisions. So having videos such as the one I just shared, or some resources to be able to show the progression of the condition will be incredibly helpful. I then explained that as dementia progresses, there may come a point where some questions and concepts about their health may no longer be able to be understood or responded to. And my third tip is to read the enduring guardian documents carefully, because often what I hear is, oh, I didn't need to worry about an advanced care plan. I already have an enduring guardian document. So isn't that enough? And while an enduring guardian is legally appointed to manage their health care if they're unable to make decisions, quite often the document does not contain enough information about healthcare treatments they would like or would refuse. So to help us apply this, we're going to have a look at 2 case studies. So this is John. John's been living in his home with his wife. He is now 67. He's been diagnosed 2 years ago with vascular dementia. He retired from the banking world earlier this year due to the demands of working with complex data, and putting reports together just was no longer possible for him. He still rides his bike to the local cafe most days, reads spy novels, picks his grandkids up from school, helps them unpack. So there's a high level of functionality here for John. And he's actually coming to see you today because after a lengthy consult with his orthopaedic surgeon about whether to have a knee replacement or not, he actually has decided that he would like to have a knee replacement. So the surgeon actually gave him 3 different options, which one to do, and John, and while he was pretty sure that he wanted to have the knee replacement, there was a final line in there from the knee surgeon to say, but I do recognise that John is living with dementia, not quite sure about his capacity. I'll leave that to you as the GP to discuss further. So using the capacity toolkit, going through those 5 elements of capacity as you're talking with John in your consult, you can actually hear in John that he is able to hold the complex task of making decisions and plans. He's able to weigh up pros and cons and understands the complexity post-surgery, including rehabilitation. So between John and yourself, you do agree, yes, let's move forward with the knee surgery, and you start to look at some of the pre-admission paperwork. And there's the question, do you have an advanced care directive? At this point, you're there to facilitate and support John. Which document do you think John will use? The advanced care directive, which can be created and signed by him? Or does he not have enough sufficient decision-making capacity, in which case he would use an advanced care plan? In this case, John would use the advanced care directive, which is the blue, often as we call the one with the blue colouring at the front. Susan, however, Susan is 76 and she lives with her daughter Anne. Now, Susan's been living with Alzheimer's for 8 years. And Anne has taken on the role of her mum's full-time carer in the last 2 years. Anne helps Susan with daily activities such as helping her get dressed for the day, arranging and driving her to all her appointments. She makes lunches and dinners, and she makes sure that the TV is set to her favourite channel each night. Now, the next GP visit is her first 75 health assessment, and the practice nurse mentioned that she wanted to talk about advanced care planning. So she's asked Anne to take a look at the Enduring Guardian document to see if there are any wishes in there about future planning for health. So Susan's looked at the Enduring Guardian document and there's no specific wishes or requests. And so Anne needs to, for what Anne should consider if her mum becomes very unwell. So between the practice nurse, Anne and Susan, they actually have a chat with Susan about some what-if scenarios. But all Susan can do is smile and nod when she's asked a question. She's not really able to communicate or answer any of the questions. So the practice nurse has advised that Susan no longer has the capacity to make decisions about her own health. And as Susan's Enduring Guardian, she now needs to think about what her mum would or wouldn't want for future health care. And in this situation, the document that you're going to present to Susan and Anne to work through would be the advanced care plan, or the longer term advanced care plan for a person with insufficient decision-making capacity. So that half an hour has gone incredibly quickly. So to wrap up those key practice points for how to have conversations about advanced care planning for people living with dementia, it's incredibly important to remember that a diagnosis of dementia does not automatically remove a person's capacity to make decisions or express their own wishes. And as legal and health professionals, we must assume that a person has capacity until it's been determined otherwise. However, it is important to understand and to communicate with your patients that as dementia advances, their legal capacity to make and communicate decisions about everyday life, including end-of-life care and future decisions, may become insufficient. So just to show the difference in quality, this is quite often a typical advanced care plan example. Very tick and flick, very yes and no. By comparison, a comprehensive, meaningful advanced care plan can look as comprehensive as this, but recognizing that this is by no means a 5-minute conversation during a 15-minute consult, and it requires an investment of time with fantastic facilitation skills to be able to elicit this information out for you and your clients. So please take the time to reflect upon your current practice of monitoring this progressive condition and how you actually share that with your colleagues and with your patients. Determining if the document is a directive or a plan is incredibly important and centres around determining their decision-making capacity for making future health decisions. And you actually have a great influence in being able to initiate and facilitate these conversations within general practice. For me, there is an element of time when living with dementia. And so we encourage everyone to not leave these conversations too late so that it's someone else making decisions for them. We want their voice to be captured and articulated as well as possible and as early as possible. So who can help you? You have Advanced Care Planning Australia, and they have both their website and also their care planning support service. You have New South Wales Health, and then you also have Dementia Australia's National Dementia Hotline. So very, very conscious that that is now our 30 minutes up, and I recognise that many of you will probably need to get back to your work, so I appreciate your time. But now I'd like to hand over to you. Any questions you may have, challenges, barriers, questions of me.
Thanks so much, Deb. There's nothing in the chat right now, but if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in. I'm just going to put in the evaluation for this session into the chat now.
Okay, so what I'll do is, while people might be typing or thinking about a particular question, the Nightingale program overall, what the Nightingale program is a palliative model of care, and it's provided traditionally at home by specialist nurses, but we can also support with transitioning into other healthcare settings such as residential aged care. And what the Nightingale program does is it offers strategies and advice to support people living with advanced dementia and their care partners. And we really focus on promoting choice and well-being during the final stages of the disease. So if anyone is interested, not just in advanced care planning, but if you're thinking, how can we best support any of your clients that are living with advanced dementia, you're more than welcome to make individual referrals to the Nightingale program, and you can do that through reaching out to the national hotline, specifically asking for the Nightingale program.
There is a question, is a formal diagnosis required before we do this form or forms?
That's such a good question, absolutely. So to be able to facilitate and promote these conversations as much as possible, try not to get hung up too much on requiring a formal diagnosis. It certainly is an important pathway to seek a diagnosis so that treatment and strategies and access to care is important, but I would not want it to stop you from having conversations that I want you to have regardless of a formal diagnosis. If you are concerned about decision-making capacity and a formal diagnosis hasn't been made, that should very much prompt you to expedite some more diagnostics.
Wonderful, thank you. There's also, is there an item number that this relates to?
So currently there is no specific item number for advanced care planning. You have your other options of having it built in within part of your consultations. It can also be part of your 75 health assessments. If you find that these conversations are taking a long time, you of course then can access your consultation E, which is that longer consultation. But currently no specific item number.
I often have families ask me if they should include their loved ones when doing the ACD. What is your what do you recommend in advising them if they have a diagnosis of dementia but can still engage in some conversations?
So it's really important for us that we promote that unit of care as early as possible. So unless there are some specific challenging family dynamics and you feel that bringing family into the conversation would create some bias or some tension initially, we very much promote that unit of care and having loved ones as part of the conversation, if nothing else, to be able to listen to the information around the diagnosis, the progression, and what to expect.
The Nightingale program is only available in the Hunter. Any resources outside that part of the PHN region?
Yeah. So the Nightingale program is statewide and we have 7 CNCs across New South Wales. In terms of being able to offer face-to-face consultation, we are of course then geographically limited with where those CNCs are. However, in terms of other support, we can speak with families over the phone, via telehealth. We can email them plenty of resources and support. So I encourage everyone to make referrals regardless of the location. We're able to then touch base with families and add value and impact wherever we can.
Should we do this for everyone as part of their over 75 health assessment?
Yes, and I encourage these conversations to be had regardless of age, because knowing someone's future wishes and having them expressed and documented isn't just for longevity and for if a life-limiting condition such as dementia occurs. We also know that there can be unexpected health events. So we want to be able to know for all of us what your health wishes are. I have mine, and I encourage this to be part of every conversation with your patients.
Just a note on the last question, which was saying interesting that your website says that only specific regions in New South Wales, and just a question, how do we refer? So they just sort of referenced the website, which has the areas which the Nightingale project is on at. So New South Wales locations, including Port Macquarie, Hunter.
That's right. So those locations are where our clinical nurse consultants are based, and they will travel out face to face within those safe driving distances. But we are able to we're able to receive a referral that's for our eligibility criteria anywhere within the state. What will change is the modality of interaction with the CNC. Beautiful. And there, as Denise has said there, if you jump onto Health Pathways, you'll be able to see how to make a referral. You can jump onto DA's website with the top tab saying for health professionals, and there's a tab there for you to be able to make a web-based referral. Again, please make sure, because as you can imagine, the amount of referrals that we receive nationally, and with Nightingale being a relatively small program compared to all the others nationally, we would hate for your referrals to be lost. If you would like, Natalie, I am more than happy to put my work email there, and if anyone would like to reach out specifically to make sure that those referrals or any particular clients aren't lost, more than happy to put that in there as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question. With Dementia Australia website, I found it difficult to hand resources to clients besides giving them the hotline number. How do we get printed resources for the above 75 population?
Yes, it is something that with the change with Dementia Australia to have everything web-based and printed off, there are a limited number of those more traditional resources that we're looking for. So it is, I don't have a perfect answer for you on that one. I'm sorry, it's something that we're challenged by as well. Again, if there is anything in particular that you're looking for, I'll have my email number, my email address that I'll post now, and you'll be able, I'm happy to communicate with you. Sorry, that was a little bit clumsy. It is challenging for us too, sorry.
I posted your email, your dementia.org.au email in the chat now. Oh, you have as well.
Well done.
We both did it. For everybody there, as Deb said, for questions regarding referrals. Thank you, everybody, for this session. Thank you, especially Deb, for that really informative session. It looked and sounded like it was extremely valuable for everybody, and some great questions coming through. As mentioned, the evaluation is in the chat. If you'd like to do that, it only takes a couple of minutes, and it's really helpful for us putting on education events. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.